a mole verde with pork and white beans. I have 4 pounds of pork country-style ribs, which means that the bone has been taken out, but all of the meat and the fat and flavor remains. So I'm gonna cut these into 2 to 3 inch chunks, and I'm gonna start adding them all in this pot. If you don't find country-style pork ribs, you can also use pork butt or shoulder. It will work just as well. Okay, I'm going to make a broth, and I'm gonna add a whole head of garlic, and I'm cutting it in half. This is such a pretty sight. One doesn't usually see the garlic cut like this. Drop it in there with the skin and everything, and then I'm gonna cut the onion in half. Just gonna throw it in there. 3 bay leaves, 10 peppercorns, 1 tablespoon of salt, and I'm gonna cover these with water, and I'm gonna bring it to a rolling boil. I'm covering it generously with water because I wanna make a lot of broth. So now we're gonna let this come to a full rolling boil over very high heat. So after about 5 to 6 minutes, you're gonna see a lot of foam on the top, and we're gonna skim that just to have cleaner broth. As much as you can, it doesn't have to be absolutely everything. So now I'm gonna cover it, reduce the heat to low, and it's gonna cook for about an hour, and we're gonna have a flavorful broth, but the meat is gonna be still nice and moist. So it's been about an hour, and the meat is cooked, and you can see the broth, how it's nice and clear. Take out all of the meat and let it rest aside. Strain the broth for cooking the beans, but reserve 4 cups for making the mole. After rinsing the pot, pour all the broth back in here. I'm gonna bring these to a boil, and I'm gonna add a pound of white beans. So different from cooking them just in a big pot of water, they're gonna suck all that broth flavor. So we're really looking for layers of flavor in every step of the mole making process. Bring these to a boil, and then I'm going to cover it, reduce the heat to low, and let it cook for anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour, just until the beans are nice and soft. And meanwhile, I'm gonna make the base for the mole verde. I have my oven set to broil, and I have 2 pounds of tomatillos. Place them all over here. I'm gonna roast or char them along with 2 serrano chiles for about 9 to 10 minutes until they're completely charred and soft. So along with the tomatillos and the chile, the sauce is gonna have 3 cloves of garlic, 4 whole cloves, but I'm gonna remove the stem. So I'm just gonna use that tiny little peppercorn on top. Then I'm gonna coarsely chop a half a cup of an onion. The word mole comes from the Nahuatl word muli, and what that means is just ingredients ground or mixed or mashed together. But to have a mole, you need a couple of things. Not only ingredients just mashed together, like whatever, I just threw something in there, that's a mole. No. To have a mole, you need to have at least one kind or another of a chile. It can be fresh, it can be dried, and then all of the ingredients need to have been transformed before they're added to that mashup, mix-up. So the mole sauce is really a translation of layered ingredients mixed together, which gives the mole sauces a lot of depth. I would say that you can compare Mexican moles to Indian curries, for example. I think it's the same concept. I'm gonna add a teaspoon of salt, about a 1/4 teaspoon of freshly ground black pepper. Now remember I had reserved 4 cups of broth? I'm gonna add a cup of broth in here. Let me check on my tomatillos because it smells. like they're ready. This is exactly what we want. We charred the tomatillos and now they're rustic, they're smoky, all of their sweetness came out. And I mean, look at their juices. I mean, it makes my mouth water. So I'm adding that in here. And you want all that charred, toasted, even burnt flavor in because that's gonna give it another layer of flavor. So I'm adding all of these in here. You really wanna get all of the flavors, so I'm adding any juices that are there, because that's good. Like all that liquid from the tomatillos, that's good. I'm gonna move the beans to the back burner, and I'm gonna bring my big casserole to the front, turn these on over medium to medium-high heat, and I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of vegetable oil. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna shock that sauce in here. Reduce the heat to medium, cover it partially, and I'm gonna let that cook for a few minutes while I puree the next layer of ingredients. Even though it's a very cooked and seasoned mole, it has a refreshing, herby, fragrant layer. So I'm adding about 1/2 cup of fresh epazote leaves. I'm gonna add a couple more cups of the broth in here. And then I'm adding about 1/2 cup of parsley, just coarsely chopped. And the other thing that I'm going to add, which has a beautiful name and it's just as beautiful of an ingredient, is the hoja santa leaf. Hoja santa translates to sacred leaf. I mean, how beautiful is that? And it's very hard to find fresh outside of Mexico, but you can get dried hoja santa leaves and they're just as delicious. They're really big and it adds a very sort of licorice taste. I'm only adding a teaspoon. If you can't find the hoja santa, you can just skip it. Nothing happens. You're gonna have a delicious mole without it, but if you find it, it's gonna add that extra, what was that in there? And I'm just gonna add the rest of the broth, and I'm gonna puree these until completely smooth. It smells so fresh, so herby. This is exactly what a mole sauce does. It adds the different layers of ingredients and we're marrying them. So all we need to do now is add the pork. So I'm gonna add all of the beans in here with all of the broth that they cooked in. Another thing that's incredibly fabulous about moles is that because of the intrinsic nature of how they are constructed, they get better and better the more they're reheated. It's one of those dishes that are so grateful that you made them that they just keep getting better for you each time you eat them. Let it season and thicken for 5 minutes, and then it's ready to serve. I like to serve it in bowls because it is very, very soupy. And then I'm gonna garnish it a little with radishes and white onion and a squeeze of lime. It's so bright. It's like you're tasting all sorts of green combined together. This will really change what you think about mole.